Welcome to part two, day two of Understanding Wealth. My name is Mensah, and I'm delighted to be here with you again. Now, we started yesterday with day one, and in yesterday's session, I started by dealing with the fundamentals, what I thought and I considered, in my opinion, to be the fundamental process in beginning the wealth journey. Now today we're going to go a little bit deeper. We're going to talk about a few more ideas and a few more strategies and ways through which you can start creating wealth for yourself. Now what I'd like to do before we begin today's session is perhaps give you a summary of what we talked about yesterday, particularly the key points. Now there was so much I said yesterday. I don't intend to go over every single detail again, but I want to draw your attention to the highlights. Now, I started yesterday talking about wealth, and I said that wealth is not simply about material possession. It's not about money. Most people define wealth as having enough or a lot of money. And I said that that definition in itself wasn't incorrect. It was just incomplete. And there's a lot more with wealth than just monetary value. I said that wealth, in my opinion, came in three levels: spiritual wealth, mental wealth, and physical wealth. For the spiritual level of wealth, I said you express that simply through love, gratitude, benevolence, living a purposeful driven life, maybe living a life of passion, having deep sincerity about wanting to make a difference in the lives of other people. That is a level of wealth. For the mental level of wealth, I said, you experience that if you allow yourself to tap into what I call the 5 higher faculties: imagination, will, perception, reason, intuition. And I said that unlike your 5 senses, sight, sound, touch, smell, taste, your 5 higher faculties are really your key to greatness. All greatness is hidden in how you use your five higher faculties. Imagination. It was Martin Luther King that said, "I have a dream." He changed the world because he used his imagination. He created a picture of a better world, and he tried to influence his surrounding with that picture he had. Nelson Mandela, Abraham Lincoln, Mother Teresa, Mahatma Gandhi, all of these great people changed the world because they used their higher faculties. And I said, wealth is experienced at the mental level if you just allow yourself to use your higher faculties. But in addition to that, I said, if you can dream, if you can create, if you can fantasize, these are all starting places to begin to experience those higher faculties you have. Now, at the lowest level, I mentioned that there are 2 very important ways of manifesting wealth in a way that we can see it in the physical form. One of them was health. Now, you've heard people say, wealth is health, and that is true because you see, what we have here is a unique body, but the body needs to be nurtured for and cared for. And the more we look after our body, the more we have much more in terms of energy, in terms of vitality, to be able to dream the dreams we want, create those pictures, and then take action towards those dreams. But also I talked about material wealth in the form of finances, or might talk about financial provision. And I said that that is simply achieved, both health and material wealth is achieved by the understanding and the obedience and the application of the laws of the universe. Now, there are so many laws, but there are laws of health, there are laws of money, there are rules of money. If you understand the principles, if you obey the principles, if you apply the principles, then the outcomes are guaranteed. Now, that was how we started the session yesterday. But then I concluded yesterday's session by talking about a simple formula, a formula that I had learned some time ago on how to become financially wealthy. One of the things I started with yesterday saying was, this is going to be what I consider to be a complete series for wealth. We're going to begin at the lowest level. Now, I said the lowest level of wealth was financial wealth or material wealth. And then I'm going to take you on a journey all the way up to the spiritual level of wealth, because unless you have all three levels of wealth present, you have an incomplete equation. And I don't want to just teach you about how to achieve financial wealth. I want to show you how you can use your higher faculties, how you can dream. I want to show you how you can use your memory. I want to show you how you can use your perception. I want to show you how you use intuition. But more than anything, I want to show you how you tap into the spiritual level of wealth that leads to happiness and fulfillment and joy. But we're going to begin with financial wealth. Now, before I jump into today's session, I want you to do me a favor. I want you to do two things. First of all, I want you to reach out to 2 or 3 people and say, I want you to tune in because Mensah is about to share some really interesting and unique principles and ideas. You can send a text message if it's too early where you are. If you can make a call, by all means, you can do that. But I want you to invite someone to join us. And the reason I want you to do that is because I found when I started to learn a lot of the principles I'm going to share with you, I realized that you don't get to enjoy anything in life until you share it. And that has led me down the journey, and that has brought me before you here today. And so as I share these ideas with you, I want you to imagine what the world would be like if a lot of these ideas were known by many. You know, I believe that we all could start living a really beautiful, remarkable life, as opposed to having a few people have all the information. You know, one great writer said, "My people perish for lack of knowledge." Now, the second thing I want you to do is I want you to get a journal, get a pen and get a journal, because I'm going to share some ideas that I think you might want to make reference to. But I want you to relax. I want you to be completely relaxed. The reason is simply because you can rewatch, you can replay this whenever you feel like. It doesn't have to be today, it can be next week, it can be in a few days' time. But if you have a journal and a pen, I want you to hold it close by. For one reason, I consider myself to be the least important part of this whole process. You are the most important part of the whole process. And what I want you to do is, as I share some ideas with you, what you realize is, for some of you, I'm speaking to the person inside you. And you know when I'm speaking to you. But also, as I share some ideas with you, what you might find is that the environment around you changes. In other words, the genius in you, the greatness you have in you, is awakened. So I want you to listen not to what I'm sharing. I want you to listen to what yourself, your inner self, is saying to you. Now, you might find some ideas and some thoughts and some questions pop out, perhaps stimulated by what I share, but not directly related to what I say specifically. And those inner conversations, I believe, is the gold mine, and I want you to capture that. Now, you know, we have about 50 and 70,000, between 50 and 70,000 thoughts every day. And, you know, don't leave it to chance. You know, a blunt pencil is better than the sharpest mind. Now, I'm going to start today's session by making reference to a simple concept. The concept is a journey. I believe life is a journey. And I'm going to use the analogy of a journey to take you through the process of redesigning, recreating your financial future and destiny. Now, my outcome for today is simple. I want to show you how you can begin to create both time and money freedom. I think if you have money freedom but don't have time freedom, you have an incomplete equation, and vice versa. So I'm going to share some ideas with you. Now, In every journey, there are three very important parts to every journey. You need to know where you are. You need to know where you're going. And finally, you need to know how you're going to get there. So in describing this, let's use this as a board and we say, here is your location. And you're trying to get to a destination. Now, once you have your destination confirmed and you have your location known, now you can find a path, a pathway. I call this a map. You might call this a road map. Something that guides you from where you are to where you want to get to. Now, because I'm going to be going into the detail so that it's very simple to understand, what I might do in today's session is I'm going to separate these into three different sections as part of this series, because I want you to have great understanding. You see, and I believe that there's no need for us to just kind of rush through each. So what I'm going to do with you is take each one piece at a time. Now, if I were to meet with you and let's say perhaps we were sitting in a cafe down the road, and I was sitting just right next to you and I asked you a question, what do you want? Now, I'm certain in my heart that you would be able to tell me exactly what you wanted from life, particularly financially. Now, I found that when I ask people the same question, most people have an idea about what they want. But when I ask the second question, where are you? Where are you right now? I find that most people struggle. So knowing what you want is a lot easier than knowing where you are. And for that reason, I'm going to start today's session dealing with your location. And part of the reason is simply because if you drive and if you have a navigation system in your car, a GPS system, once you've put in your destination, the GPS system has to calculate the route or the route, depending what part of the continent you're from and how you pronounce the word. It calculates the road map based on your location. So I'm going to start with your location. Now, if you've been to any well-developed city with good infrastructure, if you've been to a large building, maybe perhaps a shopping mall that you're not familiar with, or perhaps an airport that you're not familiar with, occasionally you might miss your sense of direction. And normally in such places, buildings, cities, there's normally a map, a tourist map. And on the tourist map, it always has a small outline of where you are, but it has a sign that says you are here. Now, once you have identified where you are, now it's a lot easier for you to know how to get yourself to where you want to get to. That's what we're going to deal with. So, in dealing with your location, there are two sets of information we want. The first is your net worth. Your net worth. The second is your wealth worth. So the first thing we want is your net worth, and the second is your wealth worth. Now, both are different, and both provide you with a different piece of information about your financial position. I like to refer both as simply like the X and the Y coordinates. The X and the Y coordinates, if you were trying to plan it out, you could say on the X coordinates, this is where you are. On the Y coordinates, this is where you are. So now you know your exact location. Now, most people are familiar with the net worth statement and what that means. As a matter of fact, in 2017, about 3 or 4 months ago, the Forbes magazine came out with the 2017 Forbes list, the wealthiest people in the world, about 2,000 billionaires. And they've ranked each and every one of them based on their net worth, how much they're worth. So we are familiar with net worth. But what I found is, if you want to understand the journey to financial freedom and financial wealth, your net worth is not as important as your wealth worth. And I'm going to go into the detail of both. Now, your net worth is simply taking your assets and deducting from your assets your liabilities. It's really that simple. There's nothing complicated about it. But I think its simplicity sometimes limits our potential. It stops people from going a little bit deeper. And the angel is always in the detail. So what I want to do with you is just go in a little bit deeper into how you can get your net worth. Now, there are two documents that you need to obtain both sets of information. For your net worth, you need your financial statement. For your wealth worth, you need your wealth statement. So we're going to start now by looking at your financial statement. Now, for many of you, you're probably thinking, I don't need to know what my financial statement is. Well, let me assure you, if you're going to create financial wealth, if you want to be wealthy, it's a must. Most people are familiar with the credit statement. Unfortunately, the credit statement is for people who want to remain poor. If you want to remain average, if you want to stay in a mediocre lifestyle, then you need your credit reports. But if you want to create wealth, if you want to become financially free, you need your financial statements. And every business that operates without a financial statement will not last. In the same way, you have to start seeing yourself as a business. Now, I'm going to say a few things that I want you to remember. One of the changing processes that I had to go through was understanding and recognizing that I'm not just an individual. When it comes to money and wealth management, you've got to stop seeing yourself as a person or as a family. You're a business. Now, I am a business. Now, if I am a business, then I am also the CEO of my corporation. I am a company. You are a company. You are the CEO of your company. You're the chief executive officer of your company. But I am also the chief operating officer. I am the COO of my company, of myself, of my life. But I'm also the chief financial officer, the CFO. But it doesn't even stop there. I am also the chief information officer. Now, the list can keep going on. The point I'm trying to make here is simply, you're responsible. And if you're a company, then there are resources you need, but also resources that you have to manage. So we start with your financial statement because that shows us your financial blueprint. Now, I love the word financial statement and I love the document simply because it shows you your past, it shows you your present, it shows you your future. If your character doesn't change, if your behavioral pattern doesn't change. In other words, your financial statement is like a crystal ball that shows you everything. Now, the first thing we do is we draw a line. We split this square into two. We draw a line down vertically and midway horizontally, and this creates 4 new boxes. Fairly simple. In the first box we write we write income. In the second we write expenses. In the bottom right we write liabilities. And in the bottom left we write assets. Now what you've done here now is you've created order in your financial life. Now you might be thinking, I know all of this already. I don't want to go through the same teaching that I had so many years ago. Stay with me. You'll find that what I share with you in the next few minutes will blow your mind. A lot of what I'm going to share with you is nothing new. I'm really here to remind you of what you already know. Repetition is how we learn. The repetition is the architect of change. Now, you've heard people say repetition is the mother of all skill and all change. In truth, spaced repetition is how we change our lives. You know, to change your life, you have to renew your mind. One writer says, don't be conformed to this world. Be you transformed by the renewing of your mind. You've got to go back and listen again and listen again and listen again. So what I'm sharing with you in a lot of areas is nothing new. Intellectually, you understand it. So I'm simply here just to remind you of what you already know. Now what we've done here, we've created order in your financial statements. Nature's second law is movement. Movement is a sign of life. You know, the heart has to keep pumping blood all the way through the body. You need movement. Your lymph system has to keep pushing all the toxins away from various parts of your internal system in order for you to stay alive. You and I have to breathe. Breathing is a sign of life, but it's also an indication of movement. Now, if there is no breath, there is no life. Now, in the same way, in your financial life, how do we bring it alive? How do we bring this whole statement to life? We need movement. And so the first question you ask yourself is, in the 4 corners of this financial statement, what is consistent? What is the lowest common denominator? The word is money. So we're dealing with money movement. Money is consistent in all of them: income, expenses, liabilities, assets. So we're dealing with money movement. Now in the business world, it's called cash flow. That is a word we understand. We say cash flow, meaning there's a direction of movement of money from each box. That is the key. Understanding financial literacy begins, first of all, with recognizing the vocabulary. In other words, you need to understand words, you need to understand numbers. Now we're talking about words. In a short time, we'll be talking about numbers. But you've got to understand each and every single one of these words. Now, if you've ever traveled to a foreign-speaking country, let's say you've been to France, and it was your first time going to France, and let's say, for example, you cannot speak French. Also, it could have been Spain, it could have been Italy, who knows, it could have been somewhere in China. If you cannot speak the language, then you would agree, as I would agree, that your experience is limited. Your interaction with people is limited because you can't understand them, and maybe they can't really understand you. You would also agree that the memories that you would have had from that trip is somehow limited. And that's the same thing about financial wealth. There's a vocabulary to wealth. You have to study the vocabulary. Now, one of the things I recognized that limited me for so many years was I didn't understand the vocabulary of wealth. all of us are playing the game of money. Everyone is playing the game of money. Some of us have learned the rules. Now, for a long time, I didn't know the rules. So I was like an amateur playing a game against professionals. And for so many years, I was losing. Now, if you're going to change your financial life, you've got to learn the vocabulary of money, but also you've got to learn the rules of the game. Because if you don't know the rules, you're going to lose. Now, coming back to this financial statement, we start by looking at the movement of money in each box. But before we deal with the movement, we want to go back into each and every one of these boxes and understand what it represents. Now, to populate this box, because the population of the box will enable us determine your net worth. In the first box, we have your income. What we do here is what you have to do. Now, I understand you don't have all the information with you right now. You're going to have to do this later on. But I'm going to share how you can do this and how you can very easily calculate your net worth. Your income is simply obtained by looking at all sources of income into your life. If you have a job, it could be a salary, it could be commissions, bonuses, it could be wages, it could be tips, but also it could also be income from dividends. If you have a stock portfolio, if you have investments, what we want to capture here is all of your income sources. Now, once we have all of it identified, now we then capture the amount you obtain every month. But we're capturing the net amount. There's a difference between the gross and the net amount. We want to capture the net amount. Your gross amount, gross income, is your total income before any deductions are taken out. Your net is the total amount you receive after all deductions are taken out. Now, the deductions I'm referring to would include things such as taxation or taxes. It could also be maybe pension contribution. Depending on where you're watching from, there are certain legal requirements that may be applicable to your income. So let's say, for example, you have a salary of £50,000 in your contract. In London, if you were earning £50,000, then every year you wouldn't go back with £50,000. You would probably go back home with roughly about maybe £38,000, 500, something in that region. So what we capture here is your net income, because we want accuracy. Now, once you've done that, sum it all up and that gives you your total income. Very quickly, we move to the expenses section. We do the same thing, looking back the last 30 days, perhaps looking or referring to your bank statements, your credit card statements, your cash payment ledger, wherever you've lodged the payment you made, if you have. What we want to capture is how much you spent and what you spent and what you spend also regularly. Your expenses come in two parts: standard, non-standard, or what I call fixed and variable. We want to capture all of your expenses on a monthly basis. So we make a list of all of the expenses that you spend money on, and then we put down the amount. We sum everything up to get your total expenses, but we have to apply a correction factor. We multiply the total amount, we multiply it by 1.1. In other words, we're adding an extra 10%. The reason for the 10% is because, interestingly, whenever we're estimating in relation to what we owe, we have a tendency to underestimate. But also, it could be that whilst you're doing this, you may have missed out on maybe an expense payment that you have to make every month, or maybe once every year. So add 10% to your total expenses, and that gives you your estimated expenses. Once you've done that, we'll move very quickly to the liability section. In the liability section, you do the same process, the same thing. Now, you'll notice that we've separated, or we've kept separate, your expenses and your liabilities. Let me explain the reason why. Your expenses refer to items that you pay for And most of them, in many cases, are necessities. So these are items you have to pay for in order to maintain a chosen lifestyle. Your liabilities, on the other hand, represent, in many cases or most cases, something that you intend to start paying for sometime in the future. So your liabilities really refer to debts. When we say liabilities, we're talking about debts. But I should mention that your liabilities would include debts, in some cases, personal debts, but also they could also include investment debts. So make a list of all of the debts you owe, sum it all up, and that gives you your total liabilities. But just like we did for the expenses section, we have to apply a correction factor again. And so what we do here is we add 10% to get your total estimated liabilities. Once you've done that, we move to the asset section. Now, this is the most exciting part of the entire 4 sections in this financial statement. In the asset section, we want to capture your assets. In this case, I'm going to assume that there are items you have of value, both personal or maybe business. So make a list of everything you have that has a value. When you've listed it all out, now we're going to assign a monetary value to it. What we want to capture here is the actual amount, not what you paid for it. So for example, you might have a sofa. You may have paid £2,000 for the sofa. You may have bought the sofa 4, 5, 6 years ago. Now, yes, the sofa is worth £2,000 to you, but in the marketplace, it may be worth less. Now, the buyer is the one who decides the terms upon which the transaction is completed. The seller decides the price, the buyer decides whether it's acceptable. So here is my recommendation. To make sure that this section of your financial statement is fair and accurate, what I want you to do is separate your assets into 2 categories. One we call personal items. The other we call general items. Now your general items could be maybe a business. It could be maybe property or real estate. It could be bonds, stocks. It could also be gold and silver. It doesn't really matter. It could be other commodities, but separate both. Now for your personal items, I want you to imagine that you have to sell all of your personal items. Now there are websites and places where you can sell second-hand products. Maybe you've never used it before, but as soon as you purchase something, it becomes second-hand, whether you use it or you don't. Ask yourself a question: if I had to sell each and every one of my personal items, how much would I get for it? So rather than do the assessment based on what you perceive it to be worth, let the marketplace decide what is worth. Now, take the average of maybe 4 or 5 different sites: Craigslist, eBay, Amazon. There are a few others around the world. I don't know where you're watching from, but go to the marketplace and let the marketplace decide what is worth. Now, for your non-personal items, imagine that you had to sell everything within 7 days. For example, if you had a few stocks in a company, what if you had to sell it within 7 days? How much would you get for it? Now, when you've summed up all the amounts, that gives you your asset value. But we're going to apply a correction factor just like we did for the liabilities section and the expenses section. This time around, we will deduct 15% from your total assets. Why? Whenever we're dealing with things that we have an emotional attachment to, we overestimate. Now understand something, that in preparing your financial statement, you're not trying to impress me. You're not trying to impress yourself. You've got to be very honest. And the truth of the matter is, if you have to sell all of your stock portfolio today within 7 days, if you have to sell maybe properties that you owned within 7 days, there's a possibility that, and a very high one, that you may have to sell it for maybe about 80 or 90% of its value. So we want to capture the real assets estimates. Now, once you've applied the 15% deduction, you now have your total estimated asset amount. It's very simple. We're now going to move into how you calculate your net worth. But before we go further, we've got to get back to what we talked about before, which is cash flow. Now you've populated each and every single area, we can look at every single part of the financial statements. Your income section simply means that money flows in. Your expense means that money flows out. Liabilities means money flows out, because you're talking about debt. Asset means that money could flow in. The crystal ball in these 4 sections is simple. If you want to see your financial future, you simply have to look at how money flows in and out of your financial life. The key to wealth is for you to focus on acquiring assets and minimize liabilities. However, the assets have to be assets that appreciate in value, number one. More importantly, assets that create an income so that you have income flow into your income section of your financial statements. So you want to minimize assets. You want to maximize assets. You want to minimize liabilities, because liabilities cause money to flow as expense away from you. Now you might be thinking, I cannot get it. I found in my case, one of the reasons I stayed financially dependent and poor for a long time was because I didn't understand words. Like I mentioned earlier on, I didn't understand that there was a difference between assets and liabilities. And the difference is quite subtle. It's when I learned about this, it seemed like a light bulb moment. That moment of awareness and revelation. I'm going to define both so you can understand why there is a difference and why people make mistakes. An asset is simply something that after the original capital investment, when you've purchased a product, an item, a commodity, the commodity appreciates in value and, but not always, the commodity, the product, the service creates an income. So it causes what we call positive cash flow. It causes positive cash flow to your life. So your net worth is increasing because the appreciation increases, but in addition to that, it creates an income, so your wealth increases. A liability, on the other hand, is one whereby after the original purchase, not always, but after the original purchase, it depreciates in value. In some cases, it could appreciate in value. But the key word is not whether it's appreciating or depreciating in value. It's what is it doing? In this case, a liability causes money to move away from you as an expense. So for example, if you buy a car, if I walked into a showroom in central London and I said, I want to buy this Aston Martin DB9. And they said, well, it's going to cost you £120,000. And I say, okay, I'll take it. If I got into the car and I were to drive just 2 minutes down the road, and I got to the traffic light and I turned back, came back to the showroom and said, I changed my mind. I paid £120,000 for that car. They would only offer me roughly about £95,000. I would have lost 25% of the value in 2 minutes. And that is the power that liabilities have. They depreciate in value. So a car is a liability. Now, if I kept the car, it's cost me some original capital outlay. But in addition to that, I'll have to keep up with maintenance, road tax. I have to do all the servicing. So every month, I have money flowing away from me. That makes it a liability. On the other hand, your home, if you have a home, Your home is also a liability. Now, your home is an investment. A car is a liability, but it's a bad liability. A home is a liability, but it's a good liability if you manage it well. But it's an investment. So your home could be appreciating in value. However, every month you have to pay for insurance. You have to pay utility bills. So it's causing money to flow away from you. Now, I know most people have homes and they love their homes. I'm not suggesting that you shouldn't buy a home. All I'm simply saying is you've got to understand the vocabulary. Now, can you see how both, in some ways, you have bad and good liabilities, and it gets really confusing. I think that's what confused me for so many years. The key here is this: an asset causes money to flow to you. A liability causes money to flow away from you. If you want to be wealthy, buy assets, minimize liabilities, therefore you minimize your expenses. This section of the financial statement creates wealth. This section creates freedom. This section creates abundance. The key is it has to all be focused on assets, investments that appreciate in value and create an income. This section of the financial statement leads to poverty. This section leads to security and dependency. You can't have both. You've got to have one. Now, if you want to have freedom, you have to be willing to let go of security. Now, many of you are thinking, well, does that mean I can't have the good things of life? Absolutely not. As a matter of fact, there is a way around this, and I'll share, as we go along, I'll share some more with you. But here is the point. I'll go back to the Aston Martin example. I think that still rings. So let me use that as an example. If I took £120,000 and I bought an Aston Martin, it's a liability. Every month, perhaps, let's say it costs me maybe £1,000 to keep. £1,000. So every month it's costing me that much. Okay. That is what people who are financially uneducated, or perhaps people who don't have a high financial IQ, would do. What the financially intelligent will do, however, is they will first of all buy assets and let the assets buy the liability. And I'll show you how. In other words, you're eating your cake and having it. So what they do is they secure their original capital investment, and then they use the profits, the gains, to buy their liabilities. So their net worth is not affected, but also if they do it smartly, they continue to increase their wealth. Now you might be thinking, how is that possible? It's very simple, it's very easy. I'm going to use a very simple example that I relate to. £120,000 you have as capital seed. If I had £120,000, I can go to the bank and say to the bank, listen, I've seen a real estate investment property, commercial or residential, that I want to buy. The bank is willing at this point in time to give me roughly about £580,000. Together with that, I have £700,000 available. I go, I buy a property for £700,000 and I keep it. Now, if you buy smartly and you buy in the right location, what you find is that you have two means of appreciation, passive and active. Passive simply means you do nothing to the property. The location and the demand supply requirements help improve the value. Now, what you find in many cases in great locations, if you want active appreciation, you simply have to do some work on the property, and that increases the value. Now, what the financially intelligent do is they buy an asset. They might wait for a year, they might wait for 2 years. Now, I call that delayed gratification. So it's not that you buy a property, you buy an investment, and immediately you get the money back. No, you've got to wait. There is a sequence to success. Sacrifice, wait, and then you get the reward. There's a season to sow and there's a season to reap. You can't do both at the same time, and you can't do both in the same season. You've got to understand the laws of the universe. They work very well. You buy a property, you buy into some stock provision, you buy into commodities, but then you have to wait. Now, by applying good financial management, what you will find in most cases in 2 years or 2.5 years, you've increased the value of that investment. Now you can pull out £120,000, in many cases tax-free if you do it smartly. Once you've done that, you can now buy your Aston Martin, but you still have the assets. Now, I've used real estate primarily for one reason, because of the tax advantages, but more importantly because the leverage options. Now, the leverage options I used, £700,000 investment, the bank wouldn't give you that loan if you were buying stocks, if you're buying gold, if you're buying commodities. So it's about financial intelligence, knowing what works. Now, by buying an investment first, in 2 years, that investment can now pay for the liabilities. And in addition to that, the cash flow from the investment can cover the regular monthly payments of £1,000. So in other words, you have a car for free, but your original capital is still there and you have an asset. That is how the financially intelligent use money. Now, I'm sorry that I kind of digressed a little bit and I went off what we were talking about. Now, let me come back to the financial statements. Now, you've populated each and every single section. To get your net worth, what you simply do is you add your liabilities and your expenses together and you deduct the total amount from your assets. Now, let me just take this out so you can see how this works. Now, if you have questions, and I'm flowing, I'm in a flow state now, so but if you have questions, if there maybe some comments you have, if you put it up there, I'll have a look at it and I'll get back to you with the answers. Perhaps what I might do is before I start every session, I'll go through the questions that were asked and I'll try and answer them, because this is not about me trying to force information to you. I want to know how best to help you achieve your financial dreams and goals. But I don't know what those goals are, only you do. Maybe if I was sitting with you right now, you would share those with me. So if there are questions that come up whilst I'm sharing some ideas, write it down, leave a comment, and then I'll get back to you with a response. Now, to get your net worth, we simply take your assets, the total amount, and we deduct from your assets your liabilities and your expenses. This is your net worth. It's your actual net worth. But that doesn't complete the whole process. How do we know where you stand? Now, when I did this exercise so many years ago, what I found was that my net worth was less than 0, which was a real big shocker, because I had a lot of liabilities, accessories, jewelry, cars, things I had bought, equipment that I thought were real assets. I didn't realize that they were liabilities. So when I did this assessment, I almost went into a state of depression because I found out for the first time that I had nothing. Here was the problem, and this is a recommendation to you. If for whatever reason you have your net worth connected with your identity, which is self-image, when you've done this assessment, if yours is less than 0, or maybe not too high, you find that it affects how you feel. If you associate who you are with something external to you, you're going to live in a world of pain. So here is my recommendation. Whatever happens, never associate your results with your potential. Your potential is unlimited. Now, you may have made some silly mistakes like I did for so long, but it doesn't change my potential. It doesn't change your potential. Your results are simply a reflection of decisions, actions you took in the past. Now, you and I have paid a price for the past. I believe we paid a full price. Let's not pay twice. So whatever your net worth comes out to be, don't focus on the past. You know, your past and your present doesn't have to be your future. As a matter of fact, you shouldn't even use your past or your present as ingredients to your future, except you're using good ingredients. If you made mistakes, let it go. What we're doing today is sharing ideas that can help you make the right decisions today to guarantee the future. So, whatever you've achieved as your net worth in the past, let it go. But I'll say this. If your net worth is less than zero, it's an indication that you have poor money habits. I had to admit that to myself. Doesn't sound nice. It's the truth. If your net worth is less than zero, it's an indication that you have more liabilities and expenses than you have income and assets. And you just have to reverse the equation, and I'll show you how. Now, for some of you, when you do this assessment, you might find that yours is greater than zero. But how do we know whether you've missed the mark? Now, in archery, there is a terminology used. If you aim at a target and you miss the target, they say you sinned. In other words, if you aim and you fire and you miss the mark, they say you've sinned. How do we know whether you've missed your mark? The only way we do that is not by doing what the Forbes magazine does, which is to compare one person and another, which is something we usually do. You know, you look at your neighbor, you say, what is he worth? What car does he drive? No, your competition is you. My competition is me. Every day, I'm trying as much as I can to move from where I am to my true potential. The closer I draw to that, I call that success. Growing towards my best self. The key here is, are you moving towards your best self, or have you fallen off the mark? Now, to see whether you're doing well or you're off track, what we do is we have to use a different equation. Now, Thomas Stanley has an equation he calls your expected net worth. Now, your expected net worth is simply obtained by taking your age, dividing your age by 10, and multiplying by your annual salary. To make it simple, if you're 25 years old and you make £30,000 every single year, it means that your net worth should be £75,000. That's what your net worth should be today. Now, with your expected net worth calculated, you can now compare this against your actual net worth. Now, if your expected net worth is greater than your actual, it's an indication that you've missed the mark and you've missed it badly, and corrections are needed, because it means a lot of things have to change, and I'm going to show you how. Now, we've completed one section of the financial assessment, your net worth. Now, I want to say this. Your net worth is not an indication of whether you're wealthy or not, because your net worth is simply measuring money. Now, I said to you at the start, in yesterday's session particularly, that wealth is measured in money as a function of time, because life is measured in time. And really, your wealth is based on how much can you survive into the future without having to work. The next thing we want to look at is what we call your wealth worth. Now, just like we started when we did your net worth and your financial statement, we need a different document. The document we're going to use this time around is called your wealth statement. Now, in your journal, what I want you to do is draw a square, a new one. When you've drawn the square, this time around, we split the square down the center to create two new squares. In the first square, we write investment. income. Investment income in the first square. In the second square, we write down expenses. Your wealth worth is simply your income from investments less your expenses. That is your wealth worth. This will give you a number. But your investment income is populated first of all by making a list of all of your sources of income through investments only. Not a job, income from investments only. If you have stocks, bonds, oil, gas, whatever you have, property, maybe you have savings, but it's income that comes from investments only. In other words, whether you work or you don't work, the money comes. So if you have a job, we discount your job completely. Even if that was going to pay you a bonus, we discount that because that requires the investment of your time. For wealth, we're talking about you maintaining a lifestyle without having to work for necessity, but choosing to if you want to. Now, make a list of all of your investment income sources and then put down the net amount. Sum it all up, and that will give you your total estimated income from investments. Now, this could also be business. For example, you have a business, you have other people managing it for you. You don't have to work there. Maybe with the exception of maybe the odd management time you go in just to make sure everything is okay. But we're dealing with investments only. Now, once you've done this section of the wealth statement, we move to the next section, which is your expenses. Now, for your expenses, we have to refer back to your financial statement. And what we want to do here is capture your expenses and bring your expenses from your financial statement back into this document. Now, once you have it, then we can now work out what your wealth worth is. Now, I want to say something, and I hope you understand it. When we looked at your financial statement, under the liabilities section, we captured all of your liabilities. For your wealth assessment, we don't capture equity in your liabilities. We disregard that. So, for example, let's say you have a mortgage and you have this mortgage requires a £1,000 monthly payment, but the loan amount you have is £200,000. In your financial statement, under the liabilities section, you would have captured £200,000. But for your wealth assessment, we're capturing cash flow. All wealth focuses on is cash flow, is money movement, income coming in or going out. So what we capture is simply the monthly payment. The original total debt or the equity in that debt is disregarded. Now, once you've done that, sum it all up. In most cases, it will be exactly the same as your financial statement, with the exception of maybe any extra debts you have that has a regular payment that you have to make. Once you've done that, you then deduct from the income your expenses, and that gives you your wealth worth. Very simple. However, the drama is not finished yet. Now, when you've done this, remember what we did for the financial statement. For some of you, when you do this, what you find is that your wealth worth is either greater than 0, is equal to 0, less than 0. If your wealth worth is greater than 0, then it's an indication that you have more income from investments that exceed your expenses. What that means is that you can stop working and still maintain your chosen lifestyle. If that's the case, we say you're financially free. We welcome you to the Freedom Club. If it's equal to 0, it means that you're breaking even, that you just have enough income to cover your expenses. Still, you're financially free, but you have no margins. If it's less than 0, then it means that you have more expenses and you have fewer income from assets and investments. So you are still financially dependent. Now here is the key. There is something we call your wealth ratio. Your wealth ratio is simply taking that income from investments and dividing it by the expenses. Now that will give you a number. If the number is greater than 1, the same thing applies, you're financially free. The number cannot be, it's either going to be greater than 1 or equal to 1. If the number is equal to 1, you're financially free. If the number is less than 1, you're not financially free. The tragedy that most people face, and I'll talk about this in tomorrow's session, but the biggest trouble most people have is they're trying to get financially free with a ratio that is too high, maybe 10. And that's made it so impossible for them to quit the rat race. Now, let me share something with you as well. I want to compare your financial net worth and your wealth worth. They're different. They're very different. They're not the same. Your financial net worth identifies what you're worth in monetary terms, in money. Now let me say that, and let me just deviate a little bit and say this. Your net worth has nothing to do with what you're worth as an individual. Your worth as a person is difficult to put in words. I don't think you can put a monetary value to you. I talked about this yesterday and I said that you're 1 in 7 billion people. We have 7 billion people alive today. And some people say the value of something is based on its rarity. And I used the Oppenheimer diamonds, blue diamonds, yesterday, and I said in Geneva in 2016, it sold for 40 million pounds because someone perceived the piece of stone to be worth 40 million. But also, there are only 0.00001% in the entire world. In other words, it's 1 in a million. But you are 1 in a billion. But even more than that, you're 1 in 7 billion. But let me take it a step further. We've had 107 billion people who have lived, and none of them were like you. Long after I'm gone and long after you're gone, we're going to have more people. And it might even go into the trillions. And none of the people yet to come will be like you. Now, does that give you a picture about how rare and special you are? You can't put a monetary value to yourself. Your financial net worth shows you the decisions you made financially. So don't let your financial position dictate how you feel, and don't let it dictate your self-esteem. Your self-esteem is your estimation of your worth. You're 1 in billions. Now I'm saying that simply to make a point. Your financial net worth is not the same as your wealth worth. You can have a high financial net worth, but be financially dependent. And you can have a low financial net worth, but be financially free. Now check this out. Let's use 2 examples. The first person is worth 10 million pounds. And let's say for this 10 million pounds, he or she has approximately 8 pieces of land in London. And all of those pieces of land approximately are worth 10 million. Let's also assume that that piece of, or those individual pieces of land do not have any buildings on them, so they do not generate any income. No income generated because they're not being used. It's just land, but they're worth a lot. Let's also assume the second person is worth 1 million, but this person has an investment asset, and that investment asset brings or pays £5,000 per month, and this individual has an expense or lifestyle requirement of £4,000. Now, for this second person, we say that his wealth ratio is 5/4 or 1.25. He is financially, or she is financially free. The person worth 1 million is financially free. They have 25% spare to cover their expenses. So they can maintain their chosen lifestyle, and providing the income is continuous and consistent and never falls below their expenses, we say they have a wealth that will continue. They're financially free. The person with a £10 million net worth still is financially dependent because they don't have any income stream from investment. So can you see that your financial net worth is something I want to encourage you to increase? But many people focus too much on the financial net worth, but they're not financially free. Now, freedom is found in wealth, not net worth. Imagine you came to see me and you said you were hungry, and I walked into the kitchen and I brought out some food. The food I brought out was from the freezer. It was frozen, but it had been prepared by a great chef. Beautiful food. If I place the food in front of you, it's of no value to you, especially if you're hungry and you want to eat. Now, for that food to become valuable, you have to convert that food from frozen temperature down to edible temperature. In other words, this 10 million in land is what we call frozen. It's a frozen asset. It's not liquid. So net worth that cannot be converted to cash flow, or net worth that does not generate income in the present, does not help your financial position. So here is my recommendation. Focus on increasing your net worth. That's important. But your main focus should be on increasing your wealth worth. Get yourself to a ratio greater than 1, because once you have a ratio greater than 1, you're financially free. Now, when you're financially free, you can channel all of your time, all of your energy, all of your resources, all of your intellect towards creating what we call multiple sources of income through other investment streams. So now you apply the principle that the wealthy apply. And that principle is so simple, is so basic. I think that's what I'm going to conclude with today as I draw this to a close. If you want to be wealthy, you must understand that there are 2 ways to create wealth. One is that you work for money. By that you invest time and resources and energy and your presence. The second way is that you have money work for you. The financially intelligent, wealthy people subscribe to option 2. The rest of the population, roughly about 95-96%, subscribe to option 1. You cannot become wealthy working for money all your life. This is unleveraged. This uses leverage. So as you increase your net worth, focus on reversing the role so that money works for you. Now, if you work for money, then you're a servant to money. You're the slave. Now, I did that for so many years. The difficulty with that is that there's no sense of security. Now, most people think a job gives you security, but it doesn't. Now, I remember very carefully so many years ago walking into the office. Then I worked as an employee, and the partners called all of us into the large conference room. And they said that they have sold the company. Now, that was a shocker to everyone because no one knew. They had kept everything on the low. They said, unfortunately, that as part of the merging, because they were merging with a bigger company, the new company who had bought our company had asked for us to move and join with them. But as part of the deal, they were going to lose, or we were going to lose, a third of the staff. Now, I was lucky enough to have been in the 2/3 that moved to the new company, but at that point in time, it made me understand that there was no such thing as job security. And I started to ask myself the question, am I putting all of my eggs in one basket? You see, if you have a job, you have what we call a single point of failure, meaning if something happens, you have no income, but your expenses are still there. The key to wealth is to focus on creating multiple sources of income streams whereby money works for you, not the other way around. So the point I'm making is this: focus on increasing your net worth. That is amazing, but become financially free. Now, I'm going to talk about financial freedom and how you achieve financial freedom and how you achieve the wealth ratio in the next 2 sessions. I'll go into more detail, but I'll say this as I draw to a close. It's a lot easier than you think. Part of the reason I wanted you to go through your financial statement was simply because in the expenses section, what you'll find is that your expenses reveal your habits. And wealth is created, multiplied, protected, and then passed on as a function, as a result of good financial habits. Your lifestyle decides whether you become wealthy. It's not what you earn. If you earn £100,000 per month and spend 120, you're still poor. You're still financially dependent. So it's not what you earn, it's how you live. Now, I hope you found something worth sitting for today. I'm going to draw this to a close right now. I want to say thank you all for your time. In tomorrow's session, I'm going to move to the next stage. Now, what I did today, in case you joined very late, was I was trying to show you how you can journey towards financial freedom. And I started by saying the first thing we want to do is start with your location. We know your destination. Once we have your location identified and your destination, now we can plan a roadmap to get you through to your destination. The roadmap here, we'll be talking about the plans you need, the strategies for creating wealth. What we've done today is focused on your location. You see, now we know how deep in a ditch you are, or maybe how high on the mountain you are. I don't really know. But what we've done here is we've identified where you are. Now we can start walking towards your future. I want to thank you for your time. Now, if you have any questions, by all means, like I said at the start, leave your questions and I'll do my best to respond to them, perhaps at the start of tomorrow's session, or perhaps somewhere in between the next few sessions. I want to thank you for your time. More than anything, I want to thank you for having an open mindset to some of the ideas I'm sharing. I'll conclude by saying this. No one has all the answers, and I'm no different. I'm only sharing with you some of my principles and some of the things that I've learned and applied. I don't want you to accept everything that I share or I've said. I want you to let it just sit there in your mind for a few hours, for a few days, and ask yourself a simple question. Can this information help me achieve my goals? Now, if the answer is yes, then I want to encourage you to give it a try. But before you do, I want you to study other options. Find out what's out there. Don't just accept what one person says. I want you to be the student of your life. You know, we've all journeyed through this beautiful experience, and you know, some of us will learn and make mistakes and we'll keep growing. This is growth. I don't have all the answers. I'm learning every day, just like you. As a matter of fact, I'd rather be where you are, watching. But I want you to look around and do some research and understand what you really want. And if you find that there are things that I've shared with you that can help you, it'll be an honor if you use it. I want to thank you for coming to spend this time with me. I'm grateful and I'm delighted, and I will be again tomorrow to come into your homes, depending on whether you're watching from home or perhaps whether you're on the go. I want to thank you for your time. God bless.